Welcome to the Gurmat Experience, a mind-blowing podcast that dives deep into the intersection of science, spirituality, mysticism, and consciousness. Remember, guys, this isn't about answers, it's about exploration. Every podcast will be an intricate dialogue between master and student. I'm your host, Sonia Kaur. I'm privileged to sit with world-class pioneer in mind, consciousness, contemplative practices, and transpersonal health, Master Dav Panesar, who has dedicated his work to exploring life's very big and complex questions. Welcome.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you very much to give me this opportunity to explore these fundamental questions, really, that I think every human being should be looking at one way or another. But thank you very much. So, can we begin?
Can we thank you for being here? Because this is the big thing, you know, it's not easy to contemplate and ask these big questions, never mind answer them. So no pressure, Davji, no pressure. Today we're going to reflect on two very big questions. The big questions: who am I, and why am I here, Davji?
Interesting question, that one, son. You're here because we're doing this little dialogue. Who are you and why are you here? I think to explore this question, we have to look at what do we know, what is the experience, right? So because knowing something, thinking something, believing something doesn't necessarily reflect the experience. So for example, if we look at the experience of being here and alive, which part of that did you or I have a choice in? You know, we have people who say, well, I chose this life and I chose that life. But in reality, I can't remember what I had for dinner 3 days ago, let alone remember a life that I chose. Although, you know, with near-death experiences, etc., there are kind of recollections of lives, etc. But really what we're looking at here is the kind of fundamental reality of everyone. So what choice did we have in determining our parents? The ethnicity, the gender, the place, the location, the time, the culture, the society, the language. And when we ask ourselves these fundamental questions, you will begin to come to a recognition that you are in fact a byproduct. You're a byproduct of two individuals that came together. You had no choice in that whatsoever. And therefore, once we begin with that world view, that actually we are an emergence on this ocean of consciousness. We're not neither the ocean nor are we the wave. We are in fact the water itself. So imagine existence. See, it depends on your worldview. So if our worldview is based on the principle that consciousness is the primary reality, not because someone's taught us this, but through experiential stuff with the likes of Buddha, likes of Guru Nanak, likes of Kabir, and various others. We've had them throughout traditions who have explored this very nature of what it does it mean to be me, to be alive, to be living. And they've come to the conclusion through their experience, which has then been verified, that consciousness is your primary experience, is the primary reality. And you yourself and I myself, like everyone else, is effectively a consciousness being in a reality that is being experienced, all of which has nothing to do with you.
Wow. So essentially, this happening, this emergence that we all are, leaves this really big question, which is what is I and what is self?
Well, this is it. So if you look at it, just look at your life experience. When you're born without an identity. You're born without a sense of self. This sense of self, although you know that you are ultimately, but as a child, you can't articulate that, the sense of self. So the sense of self is effectively your conditioned self. So you're born, you're taught a language, your language becomes your first experience, your first prison, in fact. And then within your social and cultural spaces, and then the religions come in and the education comes in. And before you know it, actually, it's not education, it's schooling that comes in. It conditions your sense of self into what you begin to identify with. This identification takes place in the early parts of your infancy. Once it takes place, you no longer see your exist as a being. You exist as an identity, which is a mental construct, something that Gurmat refers to as Ho, Home, and Hankar. And we'll explore these later on.
So, what we're really saying here is that science tells us that we're here because of billions of years of evolution and cosmic chance. Gurmat tells us that we're here purely because of divine will, because we're a happening. We're an emergence. It's nothing to do with us. And this can be very mind shattering for individuals, especially from a worldview perspective, for individuals who have been so conditioned to rely on the information that the world is telling you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sonia, it's like this, right? So imagine that you are you're about to go into playing a game, and every game has rules, right? Rules in order to determine whether you play to win or you play to lose, right? So in a game, there is winning and there is playing, right? And as human lives, we are in a game. Now, what's actually happened is the rules of the games have been altered without your knowledge. So when you enter into a social system, when you're born, what you don't realize is the rules of the game have now become to chase your identity and to cultivate an identity that's built upon power, status, prestige, wealth, material success, titles, the celebrity culture, whatever you want to call it. So the rule of the game has changed. Why has it changed? Because wisdom traditions have been removed. So once your wisdom traditions have been removed, then really what is influencing you is your influencers. And what are they? They're basically individuals regurgitating information, applying it, but not necessarily having the lived experience.
So does this explain that there's a feeling that there's more to our existence than mere survival?
The survival, actually, if you think about it, when you were, for 40 weeks within your within your mother, what survival instinct did you have? Right? This very idea of reducing humanity to a biological entity that is always trying to survive is a Cartesian and a colonial worldview. And this is contrary to Gurmat because it's a happening. The entire existence around you, from the blade of grass to the amoeba, to the hydra, to the galaxies, to the infinite numbers of solar system stars and universes, all of that is a happening that is doing by itself. No one's moving the clouds. No one's blowing a bit of air in order to move. Of course, the chemtrails, they're trying to, geoengineering and all that kind of stuff.
That's another podcast.
That's definitely another podcast. But you understand, the reality of existence is such that everything has an organic, natural order that takes a process from the seed, you germinate. Now, this is where initiation takes place. From a seed, you germinate, and through the germination, you begin to grow, and that growing takes place by itself. No one is doing it. Yes, DNA and various other components are responsible for the process, but they're not making it, doing it. That divine will, that unfolding, that intelligence unfolding is what we would call the cosmic order. And we are a happening in that cosmic order. So to address the first question, who am I? You are a happening. And what's remarkable about this happening, Som, is that in this infinite universe, with let's just use the understanding within Eastern theology and philosophy of the 8.4 million different life forms. Not according to Linnaeus, but according to this understanding. Out of those 8.4 million, there are billions of blades of grass. There are billions of amoeba. There are billions of flies. There are billions of caterpillars. There are billions of trees. There are billions of acorns trees. There are billions of amoeba. There are billions of infinite number of lives. In all of that, you and I and everyone else that's listening to it is human. How rare is that? Put a mathematical equation to that. 8.4 million multiplied by all the different number of life forms that exist right now in each category, and the fact that you exist.
I mean, it really puts everything into perspective. And it really challenges what both scientists and philosophers have been debating since the beginning of humanity, the essence of life itself.
Sure.
The essence of life. This isn't just a question for these, people that are trained by logic and philosophers or historians. This is deeply personal. Is life a cosmic accident, or is there an underlying purpose to our existence? And the way that you've just described it with that really sophisticated formula has proven that actually there is a very deeply personal yet non-personal purpose for our existence.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the question you asked was, who am I? Well, if the ground of being, if the ocean is consciousness, then you, my friend, and I am, are really nothing more than this consciousness expressing itself. So if we then look at really what is it that we are, man tu jyot sarup apna mool pachan, according to Gurmat. Mind, the bigger mind. Can you know yourself without the mind? No. So the essence isn't the body. Yeah? Because even when the body is asleep, the mind is active in a dream, right? So without the mind, you can't know. But what do you know about the mind? What is the mind? And this is a whole set of other podcasts, maybe, that we explore this very nature of mind. But without the mind, man tu jyot, mind, the bigger mind, the consciousness, etc. You are the jyot. Jyot, what does jyot mean? Jyot means light. What do you mean by light? Well, then people will say, well, am I a light? Am I a flame? No. A very easy way to explain that is something like this. If you walked into a dark room with your eyes closed, do you know what's in that room? And you would say no. And I'd say, well, what do you need in order to know what's in that room? You said, Dove, I would need some light. But the reality is you know that you're in that room. So which light are you using there? So once we begin to see consciousness for the awareness that it is, we begin to recognize man tu jyot sarup. You are the very embodiment of this. Recognize yourself. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit more interesting, because in order to recognize self, it ain't just reading about that text. This is where it becomes personal. What am I here for? What is the purpose of me being here? Is it simply to collect titles? Everything that you work for so bloody hard, think about it. Spent your entire life working so you have a particular house, you have this, that, and the other. Sacrifice your health in it. Sacrifice your time with others with it. All for what? Which bit of that assists us in our transition as we move from one emergence to another, right? What we may call reincarnation or transmigration. So without this understanding of the rules of the game, you're disadvantaged. And the reality is every single religious space out there, every institution, because it is predominated by the Cartesian, dualistic, and reductionist worldview, they do not even recognize consciousness for what it is. In fact, they've objectified it by calling it consciousness studies. So without that understanding, how can you know the purpose of life?
These sort of questions, these deep philosophical, existential questions, they demand awareness.
Absolutely.
They demand awareness. And also, they're the sort of questions that make you stop in your tracks, and they make you really contemplate on purpose.
Sure.
They make you contemplate on the questions about why are we alive? What are we doing here? And like you said, I feel like spiritual traditions have always left this wonderful abundance of room for these contemplations. Whereas the reductionist view is reductionist. It doesn't allow us room for further inquiry, for further exploration, for consciousness as primary reality, for understanding that consciousness is expansive. This mind is a container. There's so much potential,
Sure.
you know? And I think if we go back to the nature of being human and the essence of life and everything that you've shared and the endless wisdom that you're sharing, it brings us gently now into the question about living,
Sure.
about purpose. You know, some say perhaps the most profound way to approach these questions is to live it, you know? But what I would ask you in terms of the macro perspective is, okay, well, if we're a happening, we're an emergence, then what am I doing here? What is my search? Where is this search for purpose? And this takes us from this universal to personal. What is my role in this vast existence?